Hey everybody, it's Corey from Netta's Nursery in Posen, Michigan, and I'm back along the avenue of hydrangeas that run along our driveway. And I'm here because the videos I posted with all our tips and secrets about how we keep our hydrangeas looking so good have gotten a lot of attention and a lot of questions are coming in. So I wanted to take a moment to kind of consolidate all our tips and also answer a lot of those specific questions right away. So the first thing had to do with growing them in grow bags. My number one tip is that if you can plant a hydrangea in the ground, plant it in the ground because that's really how the plant's intended to be. However, the grow bags can simulate regular planting in certain situations. So whether it's because you want to be able to move it in the future or you have an area where you're just not able to plant because of the conditions of the soil or the plants around it, that type of thing, great option. But if you can put it in the ground and let it grow like it normally would, that's even better. Had some questions specifically about the grow bags that we use. So we've been using grow bags from a company called Smart Pots, and we've enjoyed using their product. It's been pretty good. The larger sizes have these nice handles on them, whereas the smaller sizes have more cutouts. So either works out well. I do recommend that when you're picking your grow bag, bigger tends to be better. So don't hesitate to go with a 20-gallon or a 25-gallon if it's something you can manage. It's just going to be better for the plant, and you're going to get a longer life out of that plant because the grow bags can reduce the lifespan of the plant if it's not quite big enough. Also, you'll start noticing after a year or two, the roots will start coming through the bag and start going into the area around it. There's nothing wrong with that. Don't panic. It's going to all be good. But they do tend to get past the size of the bag at some point. So we've had the most success growing panicle varieties of hydrangea in the grow bags, and that's because the panicle varieties tend to go down to like a zone 3, which means they can take really cold winters. And you do have to account for that when you're putting things in a grow bag, because unless it's buried or really heavily mulched, it's going to be exposing those roots possibly to some cooler temperatures than if they were planted right in the ground. So the lower the zone, the hardier it is for the winter, and that's going to be really important. And speaking of cooler temperatures, that brings me into a question that has come up more than once. We get it actually quite a bit. Some people have trouble with their hydrangeas going from white to brown and not really getting those nice pinks and reds or any of those special colors that the hydrangeas are known for. Now, we talked to our friends at Proven Winners, and there's two things that account for that color change and make it more vibrant. And the number one is the nighttime temperature. So if your nighttime temperatures are over 70 degrees when it's time for them to start changing, they tend to not get as pink or red. And the other thing is water. So the more water they get, the better they're going to turn. They just need that extra water to be able to give you those vibrant colors. Otherwise, they do sometimes turn more to a brown or a parchment color versus those vibrant colors. So keep that in mind. Let's see, what other questions were coming in? I'm going to check my little sheet and I'll give it right back to you. So one of the most common questions that we get is what kind of fertilizer should I use? Now we have our own little mix and we mix it up ourselves. It's a combination of time release fertilizer with bloom boosters as well as some instant release fertilizer. And what that does is it gives it the energy it needs to be able to produce a lot of flowers. We do make sure that it has something that does keep the leaves nice and green, but it's not as good as, like, people a lot of times will use the same thing they use in their lawn on their hydrangeas. They have beautiful leaves, but they don't have many flowers. That's why it's all about the fertilizer. So if you don't have access to maybe our mix, if you're going to get one type of fertilizer, I would recommend getting a time release fertilizer with bloom boosting. And usually it says for great blooms, or it has some kind of saying on it that'll let you know that it is for flowering plants. And then we apply that right when we first start seeing blooms. Now for us, that's usually the first week in May, might be sooner for people in other zones. And then we do it again in 30 days. So that's the first week in June, then again, first week in July. And we tend to give it one more dose in the first week in August. And the time release says that it's good for 90 days. But one thing about time release fertilizer is that it does degrade when the temperature goes up. So it's really important that, especially in June and July, when you start seeing higher temperatures, especially when it gets above 70, know that that fertilizer isn't going to last as long as it does when it's in a lower temperature. Also, the fertilizer usually doesn't activate until it's above 50 degrees. So if you put it out there right now, or you put it out there in the winter, it's just going to sit there. You're not wasting it. It's not going to start getting activated until it's around 50 degrees. So its prime temperature is between 50 and 70 degrees for that regular release type of fertilizer. So that would be my suggestion on that. If you're going to get something else that you're going to want to have on hand, have it on hand early, it's this stuff here. It's Sluggo Plus. And the thing about Sluggo Plus, slugs do tend to like to nibble on your hydrangeas, so do earwigs. So if you're giving it a little bit of Sluggo Plus, it's a bait. It's going to draw those in. It's going to take care of that problem before it even starts. Now, another thing you might want to consider that sometimes a hydrangea might have issues with, it kind of depends on your soil, would be chlorosis. And chlorosis is a situation where your leaves start showing kind of a lime yellow color instead of their usual rich green color. It's very easy to remedy. That just means it needs some iron. So you can get that from wherever you get your fertilizer or any of those types of places. You know, your hardware stores also usually carry it. So it's not hard to solve. And you just, you know, when you start to notice it, give it that little bit of iron. Sometimes that's also a sign that it might need some other fertilizer. So maybe it's time for that next fertilization. So that's important. And where we are, the other thing we have to do is use a product like Plant Skid. And Plant Skid is a deer and rabbit repellent. Our problem is more with the deer. So in the springtime, once the leaves start to appear, we spray it once. Then usually when the leaves get a little bigger, we spray it again. And we haven't found that the deer come back usually that often afterwards. But you do want to monitor for those deer because they tend to cause the biggest problems. So I hope I've shared a couple of tips that are going to be useful for you in growing your hydrangeas. Before I leave you, I did want to take you into our hydrangea house with all our hydrangea trees. I have to stand up on a little ladder to get this view, and it actually is spectacular. It's almost like walking above the clouds when I'm in here, especially when I'm up high like this. It's really great because they're just so full and beautiful, and you can see the difference in color. So we've got more of the vanilla strawberries and berry whites in the back. These are more of the limelights and some of the phantoms. You can see they kind of blush a little bit differently. These right behind me will get a little bit more pink. They tend to be just more that rosy pink where you get the brighter reds from some of the other ones. There's so much variety in hydrangeas and they're just so much fun and they grow so well in our region. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. We'll do our best to answer them, and hopefully everything's going well for you, and you guys have a really great week.